Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone to our work session for the Bountiful City Council on today, Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. And we are discussing e-bikes and e-motorcycles tonight. And we're grateful to our chief, Chief Beeler. And so are you good to give us a kind of an introduction here? Okay, we'll just turn the time over to you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for having me tonight. This is my first work session experience, so hopefully I meet all of your expectations and and give you the information that you need. As outlined in the staff report that was provided to you, we're not here for any sort of decision making on anything or any proposals that are being made. It's really giving information about the state of the union, if you will, for e-bikes, e-motorcycles in general, and specifically here in Bountiful and the things that we're experiencing. I know that we've had many calls, and I understand that some of you, if not all of you, have had calls and or maybe some of your own experiences observing e-bikes or e-motorcycles, and so we felt it was a good opportunity to be able to share some of this information with you. So just real quick, as stated in the report that was provided, the rapid growth in the use of electric bikes and motorcycles across the state has prompted increased attention from law enforcement, legislatures, and local governments. And like I mentioned, I'm sure that many of you have experienced some of this or had questions posed to you. These vehicles offer convenience and accessibility, but also present new challenges in terms of safety enforcement and regulation. The Utah law currently recognizes a three-class system for e-bikes. However, the emergence of high-powered e-motorcycles and out-of-class e-bikes has blurred the lines between classes and created confusion among users and enforcement agencies. We are experiencing, or like many other cities in Utah, are trying to best understand the safety, regulation, and enforcement of these bikes. So we're going to go over tonight, mainly going to focus on the three different classes of e-bikes and e-motorcycles, and you're going to see why it has been extremely difficult for us as a law enforcement entity to be able to enforce and understand the nuances between some of these different categories. So we're going to talk about e-motorcycles and e-bikes, touch a little bit on golf carts, and that's mainly all I'm prepared to speak to on a higher level. You may have questions about some other bikes and other motorized vehicles that I'll do my best to explain if I know, but we'll kind of see how it goes. If you don't mind, if we can get through all of the presentation before you ask questions, because there's quite a bit of stuff in the beginning that you might have some questions about that I hopefully will address later in the presentation. So in the staff report, I mentioned that there are two main laws that regulate or identify e-bikes and e-motorcycles. The first one is 41-6A-102. I'm going to go to that real quick on here, and the wording might be a little bit too small for you to specifically see on there. But you'll be able to notice as I go through here why it is so difficult for us to understand the difference between them. This section here is the definitions. So when you go through this entire code, I'm going to read off as I scroll down this list all the different things that are identified in here as something that is regulated. So there's all-terrain type 1 vehicle, all-terrain type 2 vehicle, all-terrain type 3 vehicle, authorized emergency vehicle, auto cycle, bicycle, bus, class 1 electric assisted bicycle, class 2 electric assisted bicycle, class 3 assisted bicycle, electric assisted bicycle, electric personal assistive mobility device, electric unicycle, farm tractor, golf cart, high rail vehicle, low speed vehicle, mini motorcycle, mobile home, mobility disability, moped, motor assisted scooter, motor vehicle, motorcycle, motor driven cycle, some farm equipment, railway equipment, semis, semi-trailers, some various types of trucks and so on and so forth. So you can see in that one code right there, there are many different types of things, from a bicycle to an auto bicycle to an auto-driven bicycle, and what all that stuff means. And those are the types of things when I'm saying that it's hard to understand what the differences are. That's the reason why, because there's just so many different types of things with different nuances between each one. If you go to 41.6A 1115.5, gives a little bit more definitions in relation to and what can be done on electric assisted bicycles. So that's mainly the class 1, class 2, and class 3 sections. Age limits, how fast they can go, how many watts they can be, that sort of stuff. So that code goes into detail, in relation to that. So it's very difficult for the average citizen and officers to understand the definitions in the law that classifies e-bikes into those 3 different classifications. So if we start talking about this, like the specific class 1, 2, and 3 bikes, here's a general terminology on what that means. A class 1 e-bike, and that's a picture of a class 1 e-bike that you should pay attention to, is a pedal assist only, so there's not a throttle associated with it. You pedal, and as you pedal, the motor kicks on and assists you in your bike riding. It does not go more than 20 miles per hour. All of these e-bikes are restricted to somebody that's under the age of 8. On a public roadway, you cannot be under 8 and ride one. And if you're under 14, you have to be supervised by an adult. So that's a class 1 e-bike. A class 2 e-bike with a picture of a class 2 e-bike. This is throttle assisted. So this one you don't have to pedal at all. You can just use the throttle on the bike, similar to a motorcycle or a moped or something like that, to be able to get around on that particular bike. But it also goes no more than 20 miles per hour, also restricted to somebody under 8, and also under 14 needs to be supervised. A class 3 e-bike with a picture of a class 3 e-bike. It's pedal assisted, so you have to be pedaling it for the motor to be able to kick on. It doesn't go more than 28 miles per hour, and that one you have to be 16 years old or older to operate. Wear a helmet if you're under 21, I think that it is. But that's what a class 3 e-bike will look like. And then an e-motorcycle. It's not an e-bike. Its power is 750 watts or more. It's not street legal. The most common name that we hear referred to, and you may as well, is a Sur-Ron. And it obviously looks much more like a motorcycle than the other ones. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second as well. With all of those bikes, there are some different regulations that we need to be aware of. So general regulations for an e-bike, those consist of no license is necessary. You don't need to have a driver's license to use one. There's no registration required. There's no insurance required for any of those 3 classes of e-bikes. E-bikes are allowed on roads, bike lanes, and multi-use paths unless restricted locally. And riders under 8 may not operate on public roadways, like it was already mentioned. With the e-motorcycles, they're not classified as an e-bike because of their higher speeds and power, 750 watts or more. They can be considered an off-highway vehicle and subject to different rules because of that. They're not allowed on public roads, sidewalks, or trails unless specifically permitted, or they get conversion kits that allow them to be street legal, like a mirror, a license plate, those sorts of things. And then you could drive that specific bike on a public roadway. So I showed you the different pictures associated with that all have different rules and regulations and age limits and what they can do and what they can't do. Besides the bike, which again, we're going to talk about this exact same slide later in the presentation, but can you tell the difference between any of those just as an average person on which classification those bikes happen to be and how we as law enforcement would regulate that or determine whether somebody is breaking a law or a rule or that sort of thing. I can't tell the difference. Kate, you might be able to, Councilwoman Bradshaw, you might be able to do that because you do a lot of bike riding or whatever. But I can't tell the difference, and I don't think the average person can tell the difference. So we talked about some of the state laws. Let's talk about some of the city ordinances that may or may not help in this situation. Bountiful City Code has 2 that I believe could address or would be the most appropriate place to address some of this stuff. 13.1.110 is skateboards, low-profile motorized vehicles or pocket bike and sleds, and then Code 6.12.109, which are the acts prohibited within a public park. 13.1.110, skateboards, low-profile motorized vehicles, and pocket bikes and sleds. I'm only going to talk about in the next 2 slides the areas that are highlighted in red. Those are the ones that are applicable to what we're talking about today. And they may not be applicable, but these are the ones that are most applicable. So subsection A says no person upon roller skates or riding in or by means of any coaster, sled, toy wagon, scooter, or similar device shall go upon any roadway except while crossing such roadway on a crosswalk, and when so crossing, such person shall be subject to all the duties applicable to pedestrians. Subsection D is unlawful for any person to operate a low-profile motorized vehicle upon any street, sidewalk, or other public property within Bountiful City. It is unlawful for an adult, parent, or guardian to allow or permit a minor to operate a low-profile vehicle on public property within Bountiful City. And then that subsection C of 2 is just the definition of what a low-profile motorized vehicle. It's less than 36 inches in height when in normal operating position. So clearly in that one, it does not call out a bike anywhere in there, and it probably was never meant to call out a bike. In previous meetings and discussions we've had, whether it be in council or council meetings or other opportunities, I believe that your guys' direction has been to have Bountiful be a city that is okay with bikes on the road and people to be able to get around using a bike. We've created bike lanes on Bountiful Boulevard and Davis and stuff like that, right? So I don't think that having a bike inserted into any of those definitions was probably ever intended, and may not be what your intention would be even in the future. That would be up for you to decide. The pocket bike thing is somewhat interesting because around 20 years ago, 15 maybe, the popular thing for people to buy was the best way to describe it is a really small bullet bike, which were termed pocket bikes or these. And because they were becoming very popular at the time, council took the approach to obviously to create an ordinance here to make them illegal on our city streets to be able to ride those. So that's why that specific device is specifically called out in that ordinance. So bikes, probably not very applicable to 13.1.110. 6/12/109, which are the acts prohibited within a public park. All the ones that are in white that are too small to probably see, you don't need to worry about for this discussion because it doesn't have much to do with it, and I will read the red ones. So in this section, in subsection I, so all of these, unless prior written permission is given by the city, it's unlawful for any person within a public park, public trailhead, or other public property to, so subsection I, drive a motor vehicle in any place other than a street or public parking lot. And an electric bike and an e-motorcycle, from the definitions that we saw before, may not, I don't think, qualify as a motor vehicle in there. Subsection L, you can't golf, drive a motorized vehicle or of any description, or engage in any other activity which unreasonably disturbs others in their use of the park. So again, a bike, specifically by its name, is not called out in that section either. Now, we could probably get away with the unreasonably disturbs others in the use of their park. I believe that's somewhat of a catch-all for us to be able to use, but again, simply riding a bike in a public park may not qualify as unreasonably disturbing others. It could, but there are lots of different activities that could also fall into that category. And then subsection N, ride on or otherwise use in any way skateboards, roller skates, roller blades, or similar wheeled or propelled devices. This prohibition applies to the entire area of every public park, including any and all sidewalks that surround them. So I would say again, the challenges on the state law and city ordinance, a bike is never called out in any of these sections. The skateboards, for people who have been around long enough, again, probably came into play similar 20 years ago, and specifically on Main Street, where lots of people were skateboarding. It was much more popular and causing disruption for businesses, and so skateboards specifically get called out in some of these sections because of some of those particular reasons. So those are the two city codes that may or may not pertain to these devices. So we can talk about, can an e-bike operate on a sidewalk? The state code 41-6A-1106 does say that bicycles, including e-bikes, may operate on sidewalks as long as riders yield to pedestrians and no local ordinance prohibits it. So just like anybody riding a regular bike, an e-bike is no different, that it would be able to ride on sidewalks just like any other device is able to. So some of the enforcement challenges that we are facing. Riders and parents are unaware of the different classifications of e-bikes, which is understandable, and what you can and cannot do in those different classifications of bikes. For us to be able to distinguish the difference between those classifications, it's hard for us to distinguish the difference between a Class 1 and a Class 3. We've had numerous occurrences of evading. So we try to stop somebody or address something with somebody on an e-bike or an e-motorcycle, and they just flee from us. Bountiful's trail system is in Forest Service and Davis County area jurisdiction for the most part. We're going to address each one of these bullets here in just a second, but that's also a challenge for us locally in Bountiful, as many of these are not in Bountiful's jurisdiction. There's damage being done to trails and our city parks. There are modifications being made to e-bikes and e-motorcycles. There's an ability to disable the pedal assist system, which is what governs the bikes to go 20 miles an hour or 28 miles per hour. And any serious accidents and or fatalities. So if we go back to this picture again on the challenge of being able to distinguish the difference between the classifications, it's just extremely hard for us to understand that. Earlier in the summer when we started to address these and as they're becoming more popular, our message to our officers here was, if it has pedals, don't worry about it, because it's going to fit in one of these classifications that has various nuances that maybe we don't need to get into the weeds on. Surons are a different animal. The picture that we're showing you right now do not have pedals. So if you see something that does not have pedals, they're much more easier for us to identify as something that is breaking the law, something that we can address very easily, and that sort of thing. So some numerous occasions of evading. So here's a video that was on just a month ago, August 31st at about almost 11 o'clock at night. This is up on Bountiful Boulevard. That's going southbound, coming up on, I believe, Lakeview, just past the temple. And if you look up in the, up ahead, you'll see some lights starting to come towards us. You see them right there, which is a pack of about 6 different bikes. They see 2 police cars right there and immediately turn around and take off. So he'll activate the lights. That kid right there on that bike just kept going down the sidewalk and then down the next street. The other kids that kept going, or other people going south, were able to just ditch down into the gully area that's just right there off to the west. So unable to address that. This next one is also just a month ago, September 12th. This is at about 6 p.m. You can see the U-Haul station. This is turning into 500 West right here, so just east of EOS Fitness. I think he's at the Honda dealership right now. You can see the Suron in front of him going south as well. So this is right here in the rush hour traffic, middle of the day. Coming up to Quick Quack and or 2600 South. Doesn't want to wait for traffic, goes up on the sidewalk, goes around all the cars, back into traffic. Officer turns his lights on right there. Tries to catch up to him, and I mean, this is just how brazen it is. He's going against a red light. There are cars going on Highway 89 north and south, and just weaves his way right through all of the vehicle traffic, and away we go. So for us, with those particular circumstances, the challenge for us is we're not going to chase for those situations. It's against our policy, number one, and it's a good policy because I don't want to be standing in front of Fox News tonight for us chasing a 14-year-old on a Suron trying to get away from us, who then gets hit in the middle of Highway 89 and 2600 South. It's not worth it. So when these youth are running from us, as you've seen in both of those situations, as soon as we see that they're running from us, we just shut all of our stuff down and go the other direction. The other challenge, like I talked about with the trails and where they're at, not a good map to maybe show the city boundaries and whatnot, but it is a map to show where the trails happen to be. There are some trails that you can ride a motorcycle on. There are some and or many that you cannot. Some that you can ride a bike on, some that you cannot. But most of those trails and the trail systems are going to be in Forest Service area or Davis County Sheriff's Office area. Some of the damage that's occurring to our parks. These are a couple pictures that Brock was able to provide for me recently. I believe this is at Centennial Park, so east of Mueller Park Junior High School. The one on the left looks like they just took shovels and dug dirt out of the park and built a ramp to be able to use for that. And the other section, I believe, is at the same park, and that's just damage to the grass, where people are riding either a Sur-Ron-style bike or an e-bike up and down the grass for that. Another challenge, modifications that are being made to e-motorcycles and e-bikes. There are e-bikes that the selling point is they want them to look like a motorcycle. So there's class 1, 2, and 3 bikes that don't look like the ones that I showed you earlier. They look like a motorcycle because people are giving them to their kids or that sort of stuff because it looks cooler to have that style of a e-bike. So now we don't know, is that a motorcycle or is it not? Well, it has pedals, so it must not be. Well, this is a Sur-Ron that has a modified pedal kit that gets put on there that doesn't do anything, but it makes it look like a bike. So now we have the distinguishing feature before of us saying, well, if it has pedals, then it's street legal, it's a regular bike, don't worry about it. Well, now there are some e-motorcycles that are putting modifications on there to make them look like a bike that would be legal to have just out on the road. So again, that presents another challenge for us. An ability to be able to modify the pedal assist system. So when they can only go 20 miles an hour or 28 miles per hour, that's because there's a pedal assist system or a computer chip or whatever it is that's in the device that governs it to that specific mile per hour range. But it's not difficult. You can go on YouTube or Google how to turn that off, and you can modify that governing system to be able to go much, much faster than that 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. And then, of course, some accidents that have occurred. Just doing a quick search to prepare for this. There's several articles on KSL and other news entities. The top one, e-bike crashes around the rides across the state. Everybody's probably already aware that there was a 13-year-old boy that died in an e-bike collision in Farmington, and a man, 21, dies after a vehicle collides with his e-bike in Riverton. Some current enforcement action and things that people have either asked us to do or have asked about is we have already shared posts from other entities who have put information out and created our own social media to put out on Facebook and Instagram and various other social media platforms to kind of share the differences on what these are, and it just really doesn't make a difference. Hasn't made a difference, I should say. Hasn't made a difference in our situation, and it has not made a difference in other cities that I've spoken to their chiefs about as well. So we still do it because it's the right thing to do and we want to get information out, but it's definitely not a solves the problem sort of a scenario. So the one on the left is a post done by Draper, the one on the right is a post done by Kaysville, and the one in the middle is one of the ones that we did. Just to give just some quick information from, again, some more local stuff for us, some stats that I was able to pull, again, in preparation for this. Starting on March 22nd and ending on August 31st, we've had 45 incidents where we've tried to make a traffic stop, tried to address a juvenile problem, or had an accident that involved a bike or an e-bike. So there were 45 total incidents in that time period. 3 of those accidents, in full transparency, I'm not sure if 2 of those accidents had e-bikes or not, because the person who it was a hit and run, both of them were hit and runs, or 2 of the 3 were hit and runs. The victim who got hit in one didn't stick around, so we're not sure exactly what that bike was. And the other one They called us after the fact, later that night. And as we tried to investigate and get more information about what type of bike, it was a juvenile who was riding the bike, to get more information from the parents about that. After 3 or 4 attempts to try and get information, there was no cooperation, and we ended up closing the case. So I'm not positive on those. I do know that at least one of the accidents, though, was a electric scooter. Out of those 45 incidents, so 3 of those are classified as accidents, 1 theft, 2 questions where somebody called to ask questions about what the laws and regulations were. And so 39 total were the traffic stops or juvenile problems where we tried to address them. With that, that's the information that I have for you. If you have questions or comments, I'm happy to help out.
That's really good information. Thank you so much. Maybe it's just preliminary, so maybe you just don't know, but I know you said you're not really prepared to make a recommendation or have us, enact an ordinance, but is there something that you think is kind of top of mind that you're thinking could be done, should be done, and maybe you're not sure what that looks like yet, or?
Yes, I think that, about a month ago, I went to a governor's roundtable with the governor and his staff and police chiefs across the state, and this was one of the topics that got brought up in that particular meeting. We're not unique in any of these challenges. Very many police agencies are dealing with this exact same thing. We do know that there is likely to be some legislation proposed and or passed this upcoming session to help. I don't know of anything that is proposed and whatnot right now, and I don't know necessarily great ways to be able to help, because by adding more language and more verbiage and more classifications appears to me to make it more difficult and confusing for us and parents who want to do it. So not jumping the gun and probably waiting to see what some of that legislation might entail might be a good thing for you as the political figure of the city, to maybe wait and see what that looks like before we do anything. We're not that far away from knowing what some of that might be. As the police department, we can probably be more aggressive. So in the beginning, we definitely wanted to be more education. So as we were stopping people and trying to address some of these things, not a lot of citations were given, and we would stop and educate and maybe call parents and again, just educate. But we might be in a place now where if we do happen to come across somebody that we need to address the problem, that maybe education has now run its course and we can potentially be more aggressive with that. Now, again, it goes back to whether we're able to stop and or catch somebody. I'm not exaggerating. This is probably having people evade us, I would dare say, 2 or 3 times a week. That wouldn't be surprising to me. There are many more videos that I could pull to be able to show some of this. So that's something that we could probably do, is that when we do catch somebody riding these, to be more aggressive in what our enforcement action happens to look like.
Can I ask the person that I thought, if I understood it right, there was some kind of a accident or some kind of a situation, and then they and their parents were not responding and following up, and that person was the victim, right? Okay. Okay.
So multiple phone calls to try and get a statement from the person about what type of vehicle and any more descriptions on what the suspect vehicle might have been. All of those calls went unanswered and messages not returned.
Okay. What other questions do you have, counsel? Chief?
I do have one more quick thing that I did forget that might answer your question that you may be ready to ask, and that's about golf carts. So there are golf carts around as well. I don't think we see as many golf carts as some other cities might. Most of the golf carts that we come across and or that I am aware of through our lineup pass-alongs and some dealings with citizens and their concerns generally are more towards the southeast part of the city. So say 3100 south, and probably Davis east. I don't see a lot of people going to our golf course, well, because they don't allow them, correct? So our golf course doesn't allow people to bring their own, but I believe North Salt Lake does. So there are people who go for those particular reasons. Having said that, again, I'm aware of places that are in that segment of our city where the people are letting their kids drive golf courts around their neighborhood to go to their friend's house and places. It's illegal unless a city adopts an ordinance that does allow it. And if they were to allow it, it would be in city streets that are 25 miles per hour or less. We do not have that rule in Bountiful, but there are several that do. I think St. George, Highland, I believe West Bountiful did maybe a year or maybe two ago. I believe that they adopted something that allows golf carts in their particular city. So golf carts is another thing that we do run across. It's not a ton, but it definitely is something that is happening.
Councilmember Bradshaw, did you have a question?
I have a couple thoughts and maybe some suggestions for action and ways that we could be engaged. One thing I wanted to point out is while definitely those bikes in the e-bike category can start to look and feel like a full suspension, fully person-powered bike, the weight differentials on the bikes with the batteries are very different, and that can become a real factor in an accident with an e-bike, particularly on trails or on sidewalks, is that the e-bikes are a lot heavier, and the Sarons, the e-motorcycles, are quite a bit heavier. So you have kind of weight ratios at play. There's a number of incidents that have happened that are reported, kind of broadly in the trail community. In particular, one of the Viewmont mountain bike team coaches was hit by a person riding a Suron on the Bountiful Shoreline Trail that does not allow motorcycles. In fact, the Wasatch Cache National Forest doesn't allow e-bikes at all. But was severely injured, and his mountain bike was completely broken as a result of that accident. So the weight differentials are really important as part of this discussion, and didn't want to kind of miss that in that, there's probably, I think, a really good place for e-bikes. For the e-motorcycles, I have some really grave concerns, and this is where I have some suggestions for potential action. Would love to get the chief's feedback. Last year, through the Outdoor Adventure Commission, I was part of an effort to run legislation to say that an e-bike, part of one of its definitions is that at the point of manufacture, it includes pedals that do the pedal assist feature, and that was to get at if you did have an incident where someone had modified a Saron bike to put on fake pedals, that would be kind of a hook you could go after. That the definition is what it came with at manufacture. Clearly, people modify them faster than we can keep ahead of it, and I agree that chase incidents are likely to end up being really poor outcomes for the police, for innocent people, and the person on a Saron. And so one of the things I've suggested in the legislative circles that I participate with the league is an effort to create some type of a registration. So there might be a license plate that would go, a licensing registration requirement like you experience with a traditional motorcycle, so that there might be a plate so that law enforcement doesn't have to chase. They just have to have the ability to get a picture so that they can follow up later at that person's residence. Representative Cutler, who is one of our state legislators, is leading kind of a small work group effort. I know he's coordinating with LELC, which stands for Law Enforcement Legislative committee, there we go. So that idea and several others are being raised. So one of our potential steps we could take would be to very much support Representative Cutler's efforts to send him ideas for how we can particularly address the e-motorcycles so that they're not causing safety issues or damage in our park. That was just one idea I had that I sent on. But I think he could use some help when he gets his ideas together, people that are willing to testify, clearly law enforcement, parks departments that are seeing damage at parks, people that are experiencing complaints from residents. So that would be one potential action we could take. Another would be, we made this graphic and we've shared it. I would love to see us put it in more regular rotation, not just on the police social media, but city and e-newsletter, things like that to, as parents head into a gifting season, to be really thoughtful about what they're buying and why, because of how fast these things can go. And, the helmets and the supervision and things like that that'll help keep their kids safe would be another thing that I think we should maybe up our efforts on. And then if we were to undertake some city ordinances, I would definitely be supportive of adding things that help us capture, in particular, e-motorcycles at parks. I think e-bikes will always be tricky if people ride their e-bikes to the farmer's market and are at the town square. That's one thing, but the things I've seen around town with, in particular, the e-motorcycles and the way they are kind of using and abusing the parks for jumps and things like that, and then sometimes using sidewalks, sometimes using roads, I would be supportive of adopting city ordinances that make clear that the e-motorcycles are a category we don't support unless they choose to become fully street legal and be regulated like traditional motorcycles. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Great thoughts. Councilwoman Child?
I have a question. Do we currently have any signage in our parks that says that these vehicles are not allowed in the parks?
It's old and outdated, but it's there. We have to look pretty hard for it. We're in the process of updating that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be at least a step to make it very clear what is allowed, what's
It would
not.
probably only address the things that are in that code, though. So skateboards and rollerblades and those sorts of things. I don't think that anything in there right now has anything to do with either bikes or something that we can't already address, I guess.
So in order to put e-motorcycles on that list, we would need to update the code,
Yeah.
what you're saying. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilwoman Price-Hughes.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Chief, for this really informative and good staff report. I really appreciate it. I do think it's clearly a huge concern. I'm curious, well, first of all, just to kind of piggyback on something Councilmember Bradshaw mentioned, I think something that I saw in a city that I recently visited is that in all of their public parks, bikes are allowed, and they didn't seem to differentiate between bike types, but you had to walk your bike through the park. And seeing as we don't have any kind of central park-sized parks in our park system, that doesn't seem unreasonable to request that you get off and walk your bike through any city park. But I did have a question. When you were at the governor's roundtable with all of the other police chiefs, did you hear any ideas that were percolating from other cities, as this is something that is facing so many cities? Are any of them taking proactive action other than the social media and education route?
Probably the only thing that was mentioned by one person that is probably something that we can do now when I talk about being more aggressive is impounding every one of the vehicles as a state tax impound. Now it's pricey and there will be some teeth gnashing, I'm sure. But like I said when I was talking about that earlier, we might maybe we're at that point for Sur-Rons, not e-bikes. E-bikes are a whole different ballgame where they're mostly legal in most of the things that we're already doing. So it is mostly geared towards the Sur-Ron bikes. It's a bike that's not registered, that shouldn't be on a public road, and an avenue to do that would be to cite the person and impound the bike. We haven't done that. Some of it is, again, because we're not having a lot of success with people even stopping for us in the first place. But we've talked internally about maybe needing to go that route. We're getting into a time of the year when maybe it's not going to be as big of a deal for the next, through the winter, and we'll kind of see what happens. But I'm willing to take suggestions and counsel from any of you or Gary on what that looks like for us going forward. But a state tax impound is definitely pricey.
Thank you.
Chief, when you say pricey, for whom is it pricey? And
Yeah, pricey for the person that you're impounding the vehicle from. They have to pay a tow yard. Like, we're not going to confiscate it ourselves and bring it back to our building to hold. We'll call a tow company to come and pick it up, and they'll have tow fees, tow yard fees, state taxes to be able to get it out from the tow yard. It's probably, you could be anywhere from, I would say, $400 to $1,000.
It's Kaysville has passed 2 ordinances, and it talks about operating self-propelled vehicles or motorized wheelchairs, and that they shall be operated shall not be operated in a reckless manner to an extent that it endangers the peace, health, and safety of other persons within a city park area, or any way that will damage the facilities, plants, or property within the park. And then they did another one that was addressing speed in city parks. Councilman Murray, did you have any questions or thoughts?
On the evading, have you seen any changes in gas-powered dirt bikes of the same age group that's just trying to get up to the mountains,
I don't think that we see a lot of gas-powered bikes being driven by juveniles. I think these
it's shifted more
Sur-Rons
to-
are definitely being geared towards that age group. I mean, that's where we're looking at probably 12 to 18 years old. That's generally the populace who are driving these. And gas-powered dirt bikes are, my experience and understanding has been, most of the time that's generally over by the B, going through some of those neighborhoods to get up to the mountains. These are not people getting from Davis Boulevard up to a trail. These are people who are using them as a mode of transportation to get from their house to their 14-year-old friend's house a few blocks away or across the city.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Higginson, did you have?
Thanks, Mayor. First of all, I want to say that I'm really supportive of the use of most of these things around town. I think it plays into our active transportation ideas. It gets people out. The e-motorcycles are somewhat concerning. Chief, I wanted to ask you if the e-motorcycles would be legal on the trails that allow motorcycles and also on our Skyline Drive access.
They would be legal on any trail that allows a motorcycle.
Okay.
Because that's all it is. It's a motorcycle. It's just
Indeed.
powered electronically.
Agreed. So I had an experience I wanted to share, and that is education, I think, has to be the key here. I was headed north on Main Street, approaching the post office, and I was about 5th in line to get stopped at the corner of Center Street and Main Street. And a bike came up on this group of cars, probably going 25 miles an hour, not crazy fast, but didn't want to stop at the light. So he jumped his bike up on the sidewalk on the east side of the road and decided to use the crosswalk. And just as he entered the crosswalk, the car that was headed east on Center Street just about hit him. And both of them had to take evasive action, so there wasn't a collision. So either you're on the street or you're on the sidewalk, I think is what, some of the education that has to happen there. But I don't know what best way to disseminate the information. All I know is that I don't want you involved in unsavory enforcement activities. I think you're doing the right thing so far. And I don't want us to discourage people from using these resources either. I mean, these things could be keeping a car off the road, which is what we want to do. So anyway, I don't know how best to accomplish the education factor, but I think education is what's going to be the most important thing to keep people safe. Thanks.
Bet.
Well, we certainly would be interested in knowing as things progress, if you do have recommendations, and we will also be doing our research. It was good to understand, Councilwoman Bradshaw, your thoughts about, perhaps the legislature may decide that they want to have license plates or for the e-motorcycles, or it'll be interesting to see how the session progresses, and maybe as things evolve, you'll become clearer about there are certain things that we could or should do. Any other questions from council members?
I have one, Mayor. I'm just wondering, so of those 45 incidents or any others before or after in the recent past, have there been any times when the police department has impounded one of these? And I'm going to just basically focus on the Ciron, because those are the ones that, as I see, are not allowed on any public roads and are causing what it sounds like the most risk and the most damage.
Yeah, they're definitely the easiest one for us to identify that there are laws being broken. And I'm unaware of us having impounded any at this point.
Okay, and regardless of age of driver, these are illegal on our roadways anywhere.
Correct. So if it was a
And-
licensed driver, they would be able to be given a regular traffic citation and that sort of stuff, just like somebody who would drive a vehicle that's unregistered or unsafe.
Right. I just want to kind of echo what Councilmember Higginson said. We do want to encourage people to be using different modes of active transportation. I'm not sure this is, the Cirons are necessarily what we would classify as active transportation when they're just being used to zip around town or on park spaces. I think specifically when we're looking at risk factors of youth drivers who are not deemed old enough to operate, have the mental or cognitive capacity to operate a motorized vehicle. We've decided those ages as a society and the legislature, and the risk to others and the property damage. I would support both education. I don't think we need to view it as one or the other. So I hope we can improve our education, or increase and enhance our education efforts, but also use that additional tool of impoundment if it does not, entail additional risk to any of the drivers.
Thanks. Any last questions or comments?
I would really hope that we would take up an ordinance to protect parks and trailheads on the e-motorcycle issue. I think it would be a helpful tool for Brock. I think it would be a helpful tool for the chief. I think it would send a message to the neighbors that have called with concerns and complaints that it's clear, and if they can get pictures that help the police identify people, short of any legislative changes that make it easier to get pictures of a license plate of some type, we ought to be doing that. There's just not a lot of room for something that goes that fast, zooming around Town Square or Fort North Park or Rocket Park, while people are otherwise, playing as families or doing other activities.
Seems like there's some head nods that people would be open to that. And do you think that the best thing is to kind of see how the legislature moves forward?
I think we can modify our city ordinance. There are parks and our trailheads.
Yeah.
The parts of the trails that we control versus the Forest Service. So I think it's within our legislative power to do that right away. Secondarily, I think we segment of our youth population that think fleeing police is routinely okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing I'd add to that is that we reach out to our neighboring cities too, to see where they're at so that there's consistency across the board, because our trails do butt up to theirs. And if one city hasn't done a similar communication or is slightly different, which it shouldn't if it's a state law, but that way if there's some consistency on the south end of the county, that it just spreads within that peer group.
So we're
That's a good
all
thought.
within the Wasatch Cache National Forest, and this could be its own very deep dissertation. The Forest Service is studying e-bikes, not e-motorcycles, e-bikes and their classifications. BLM is doing something similar. National parks are looking at it. So it's evolving on those federal lands. But for right now, I went on the Wasatch Cache National Forest page today just to double check my understanding. Even though we've been very lax in our area on e-bikes, they're actually not allowed on the Forest Service territory. Even though we've built those trails, we're under their laws for those. So North Salt Lake, Centerville, Salt Lake, we're all in the same national forest group.
Thanks. Okay, well, we're out of time, but thank you, Chief.
Mayor, could I make one more comment?
Yes.
I think that if we interact law enforcement-wise with those folks on e-motorcycles, outside of the parks and trailhead areas, I would not be in favor of impounding those things. I mean, I think a lot of times these are kids that have saved up and purchased their own vehicle, and I think that education is key there as well. And the person from our police department who interacts with them can let them know where those can be used, and that would be my first choice in outcome rather than impoundment.
Chief.
I was just going to make one quick comment to close. For points of the discussion and in transparency as well, is if e-motorcycles are in the parks doing damage, we do have avenues right now to be able to address that. So I mean, criminal mischief or various things that we can take into account for those sorts of things. So I think we have an ability on some level to address e-motorcycles that are on the grounds causing damage and that sort of stuff. And I can continue to work with Brock. He's amazing and passes information on to us all the time about problems and concerns that they're seeing in the parks, and maybe we just need to do a better job of making sure that we're following through with some of the information that he's been able to give to us, and see if there's other things that we can do.
That's great. That's good. Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for the work session. That was really helpful and interesting, good conversation. So
Thanks.
thank you for that. We're going to take just a very brief break, and we'll be right back for our regular city council meeting.